Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. Ryan is a family man, first and foremost, but he's also a pastor, publisher, and serial entrepreneur. This podcast will help you think, work, and create like never before.
Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. This is Ryan Frank, and thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you are watching today on YouTube or listening, I just want to pause and thank you so much for your time and your attention. Every week, I have the opportunity to interview amazing people. And I really hope that these people inspire you in how you think and how you work and how you create. I hope that they force you to ask questions and to grow and improve. Today on the podcast, I have one of my best friends, Corey Jones, with us on the podcast. Corey is an executive pastor. He's a part of our Kids Matter team. He co-hosts the Kids Matter podcast. He's part of our Kids Matter conference leadership team. Him and his wife, Nicole, again, are dear friends. We travel together and hang out. And today, we had a fun conversation around 5 things that we each wish we could go back and tell ourselves when we were 20 years old. You know, if you're starting to get gray hair like me, God teaches you some things along the way, and you wish you could go back and say, Ryan, hey, you're 20. Learn this. Start doing this. Don't make this mistake. Whether you're a ministry leader or a marketplace leader, I know you're going to find a lot of value in today's conversation. I want to thank Corey so much for joining me on the podcast. Once again, thank you for joining me. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and push that subscribe button. If you've not rated the podcast, please rate it, submit a review. That really helps us with our algorithms, and we love reading your feedback. Friends, thanks again for tuning in to the Ryan Frank Podcast. Here is my conversation with Corey Jones. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Ryan Frank. I have my coffee. I'm ready to go.
Coffee, not just your coffee, but your coffee in your Ember mug.
Oh, that was my birthday gift to myself last year. Big fan of the Ember. And my birthday's coming up. I don't know what to get myself. I have to think about that.
I think Ember owes you some thanks because you talked Beth and I into each buying an Ember mug, which led to Beth buying me a travel Ember mug for my birthday last year. My brother and sister-in-law have bought an Ember mug because of seeing our Ember mugs, because we saw your Ember mug.
Unofficial podcast sponsor. Thank you, Ember. Actually, for real though, the thing that I like about it is that I don't have to think about it. It keeps my coffee warm, and it's not another thing to manage. There's enough in your life to manage. Ember is worth it.
Go check it out. They're not cheap, but they're worth it. True. It pretty much you determine how hot do you want your coffee. You set it at that. And you're right, Corey, you pour your coffee in there, it drops it to that temperature and holds it there until you're done drinking your coffee. Yeah. Well, Corey, thanks for joining me on the Ryan Frank Podcast. As always, it's great to have you. Those of you that are Kidmin leaders know that Corey and I co-host, along with Amber Pike, Kids Matter podcast. Corey's been here on the Ryan Frank Podcast several times. And he's back today. So Corey's a regular. We love Corey. I was on a Zoom call, Corey, right before this with somebody else and talking about Corey Jones at the conference. So Corey's name always comes up around Kids Matter HQ.
Awkward.
We love Corey. Corey, I don't want to assume everybody knows you. You know, we're friends, our families, we travel together, we do stuff together, we serve together. But we take a minute for those that don't know who you are, and I'd love for you to just tell us about your family, your ministry journey, what ministry looks like today for you, day after day, in the suburbs of Atlanta. Fill us in, please.
So if you think about your kids' ministry and you think of, the kid, the one that's difficult, that's my story growing up. I was that kid. And my Sunday school teachers came to my graduation and told me that. And there's a level of,
Really.
I'm glad that they were there for me through it all. But
Yep.
grew up in the church, very boring story, and so thankful that it's boring because I avoided so much pain.
Amen.
God called me into ministry at a young age. Like I started dating my wife, liked her in 5th grade. And so pretty darn boring, but I followed the call and continued to trust him each step. So at 17, I started in kids ministry in a small church and continued doing it forever. Actually, 2007 or 8, somewhere in there, I went to the library of my seminary and got the K magazine and went, ooh, I like this.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah, that's my actual first introduction.
I forgot about that. You've told me that before, but I forgot about that. Yeah.
So send those magazines to seminaries because you never know who's reading.
Exactly.
And then just fast forward, I've been in kids ministry or around kids ministry since. And so today my role at my church is executive pastor, but I love Kidmin. Like I'm not just in the group. I love Kidmin. And so like last week, first service, I was in the K2 environment teaching. Second service, I was in our 3, 4th, and 5th grade being our storyteller teaching. I love it. I'm a volunteer now, but kids ministry is where it's at.
You're passionate about it, and
my wife and I do ministry together. We have 2 dogs now. Ryan, did I tell you she got another dog?
Yes.
Got a puppy.
The house is filling up. Corey's a great friend, and if you're a Kidman leader, Corey. He's such an active contributor to the I Love Kidman Facebook community and helps us with the Kids Matter podcast, helps us at the conference. Corey, you run all of our social media during the conference, along with running our Kids Matter Pro Lounge. Your wife, Nicole, produces our main stage sessions and leads the publishing division of Kids Matter. And those new books that you see at the conference every year, that's Nicole and her team, and they do a great job. We've got some great new books coming out of the conference this year that Nicole's been working hard on. So, Corey, thanks so much. Today's conversation is going to be a fun one because whether you are a ministry leader or a marketplace leader, we believe you're going to find a lot of value in learning from our mistakes. You know what? If there's anything that mistakes do for you, they create a learning opportunity. And if there's anything with gray hair, now, Corey, I'm not seeing much gray in your hair, but if you look up,
I got some.
Do you have some? Okay, I see it when you zoom up.
Yeah.
Those of you on YouTube, you saw that. Corey's got some gray, as I do. One thing you learn with gray hair is that, boy, there are some things I wish I could go back and tell myself as a 22-year-old, ministry leader or person. And so Corey and I are going to bounce back and forth, and we're going to share some things that we wish we could go back and tell ourselves, all those years ago. And Corey, I'll let you go first. What's one thing you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
I highlighted this verse 2 days ago. And so before I jump in, Psalm 71:18, now that I am old and gray, do not abandon me, my God. Let me proclaim your power to this new generation, your mighty miracles to all who come after me. I thought that was a great verse. I had to highlight it.
That's so good.
All right. So first thing, if I go back to 20-year-old Corey, I'm thinking he's just married. He's been in ministry for about 3 years, but now he's in seminary trying to figure out ministry and all that kind of stuff. Ryan, I've actually thought about this question a lot. And I think the first thing that I would want to tell myself or to tell a 20-year-old new person in ministry is that we overestimate what we can do in a day and we underestimate what God can do in decades. And so if I think, all right, just think of today, the Lord numbering my steps today, how am I being faithful today? Don't overestimate today. That is stressful beyond all belief when I look at my to-do list, and it's really a month's work of stuff. My process is different than yours, Ryan. I know for me, as I'm closing out my next the end of the day, I pull out a Post-it note and I write
Okay.
the things that I need to do the next day,
Yeah.
and I number them in order so that then when I step into the office the next day,
It's
I
ready.
I know what I'm doing. I know
Yeah.
for you, you have your Ryan's
Yeah.
sheet.
Yes.
Why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah. The productivity playbook, which, yeah, basically just helps me organize my day. What are projects I need to work on or priorities I need to work on today? Who are people I need to connect with? What are some things I need to do to move projects forward? And I love it, Corey. You're right. What system you use doesn't matter as much as the fact that you have a system in place and that you're
Oh yeah.
proactive going into your day, right? And Corey, I love that you are making your list whenever you can the day before. So you're not wasting 20 minutes, because those first few hours of your day for most people are the most productive. You're not wasting 20 minutes trying to prioritize and figure out what you need to do. You're ready to hit the ground running as soon as you get
Jumping
to your
right into it.
desk. Yeah.
Yep. So that little day focus, I think that if you make that list, check it twice, it's going to be golden for you. Do it, do it, do it. And then for the long timers out there,
Yeah.
man, you know this. You blink and years pass, and so you got the kid who is their parents are 20 minutes late getting them, and you have an opportunity there to minister to them.
Yeah.
But blink and they're graduating, and like it's just insane. And so did you do for them what you could have done? Did you actually minister to them, or were you frustrated about the moment, the 20 minutes late, that kind of thing?
Exactly.
Some of the people that I recruited a stranger. I didn't know them from anybody. I blink, times passed, they're my family, they're my best friends. It's no longer me reaching out to them to go, hey, how you doing? They're ministering to me. Like ministry, it goes so fast. The 8-year-old kid who you see singing, and you encourage them to explore what God put in them. You blink and they're your worship leader on staff.
So
like
true.
God does these huge things over time, and I underestimate what he can do. And so just be faithful. Your responsibility, it isn't to do all the major, all those whatevers. It's to be faithful with the little things that he gave you. And so take advantage of the things that might seem insignificant, the moments, steward them, because when you blink, eventually you're going to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. That's the goal.
Boy, that was so good, Corey. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks for beginning with that verse. What was that reference again? I know I can Google it later and find it, but what was that reference?
Oh, man. Psalm 71:18. I'm just doing the read through the Bible in a year thing. And I have read that verse. I've read through the Bible a bunch of times. This time when I read it, I was like, ooh, Corey's got some grays.
Yeah.
I like that.
I need to revisit that verse. That's a good one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So here's one thing I would go back and tell my 20-year-old self, and that is to keep people over paper. People over paper. And, I, as a young children's pastor, and those of you that are, especially those of you children's ministry people, children's ministry is so programmatic, and it requires so many systems and so much paperwork, and you're doing background checks, and you're checking through check sheets to make sure the rooms are sanitized and clean, and you're doing permission slips and budgets and ordering curriculum and processing all of these VBS catalogs, trying to figure. You've got so much paperwork, even though maybe the paper today is more digital, but I think you get what I'm talking about, that you can get so consumed with the paper side of ministry and the tasks and the processes and the systems that you forget about people first and foremost. And I was so guilty of this, being by nature, Corey, a task-oriented person. You're either, by default, task-oriented or people-oriented. And by nature, I tend to be task-oriented, that I would just run right past people. I would run over them and hurt their feelings, not because I meant anything by it. It's just, I had so many tasks and so much paperwork and so many things to do. And Corey, one thing the Lord, podcast listeners, one thing that the Lord has taught me over the years, yeah, you've got to have paperwork and systems. And yes, children's ministry is very programmatic, but at the end of the day, it's about people. The ministry is about people. It's about loving people, shepherding people, caring for people, taking care of those people that God has entrusted with you. And so don't, especially for those of you that are task oriented, don't be so busy focusing on the task and the to-do list and the order forms and everything that you've got to do that you forget about people. Now, Corey, do you tend to be more by nature task oriented or people oriented?
I am task through and through.
Yes.
I'm sure I'll mention him again at another point, but Jim Weidman, mutual friend, mentor, he taught me so much about how people are the ministry. They're not a distraction. They're not a waste of time. That Corey is in the same boat. I think of yesterday, I got a phone call from an old lady in our church named Linda, and Linda wanted me to come downstairs and help her with her phone. And I was like,
oh, really?
Cool,
Yeah.
cool. And so I'm getting ready to walk into a meeting. I'm trying to wrap up a deposit, and I'm like, all right, not a waste of time. This is the ministry. Go downstairs.
Yeah.
I interacted with her, helped her. She was trying to give using her phone, helped her figure that out. And when I was walking away, I told her, I said, Linda, there's a lot that I do today. And this is probably one of the highlights of my day. I love hanging out with you. And she goes, Corey, this is probably the highlight of my week. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so don't underestimate that. Steward it well. People, that's a big takeaway. You got to learn that.
Yeah, 100%. And those of you, now, I will say before we move on, because we got to keep this moving, for those of you that are more people oriented, make sure that you get things done, right? So, and for those of you that are task oriented, one thing that I began to pray a long time ago, Corey, because by default, I will be a guy that just shuts myself in my office and cranks through and gets stuff done. And I'll shut that door to keep people out. I have prayed, and I don't do that anymore. I keep my door open unless I'm in a meeting. I have prayed, God, would you give me a greater capacity to love people? And when you begin to pray that every day, God, give me a greater capacity to love people, help me to bless people, help me to be good to people, help me to slow down. And you really begin to pray that. It's amazing how that prayer, God will answer that. And it'll turn into kind of like a system or a habit in your life where you really just slow down and talk to people. All right, Corey, let's keep moving. What's your number 2 that you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
I would want you to think on your habits and your systems. And so the things that you do every day, they are perfectly designed to get you the results that you're getting right now. Are you okay with your results? Are you okay with the trajectory? What habits do you need to change in order to get there? So, for instance, I met with a clinical psychologist who focuses on pastors. And he told me, hey, Corey, you're on a trajectory right now where like you're stewarding your finances well. You'll be able to retire. You'll be able to do this. You're stewarding this well. You'll be able to do this. But you're not stewarding your health well. And you're going to be 50, which is knocking on Ryan's door.
It is. Thanks, Corey. Appreciate that reminder. Yeah.
You're going to be 50, but you've put on some weight already. You're going to be putting on more weight, and your wife is going to be able to go hike and run and do, and you're on a trajectory where you won't be able to. And I went, oh, that's very true. Yeah, I see that trajectory. I need to change. And so February, I started working out every day. I'm not going crazy or whatever, but I want a better trajectory. I want to have a habit in my life that allows me to go for long hikes with my wife when we're old.
Amen.
When we're real old, like 50,
Yeah, like when you're 48, pushing 49. Yeah,
yeah. And so, like this plays into ministry too. And so like maybe if you're sitting there evaluating and you go, the kids, they're struggling in our Bible story time. They're not paying attention. What are the habits that you're creating? What are the systems? So Are they walking into a chaotic environment? And therefore, when we get to the spot, that's what they're used to. What are the systems there? What do you need to change to get a different result? There's the Charles Duhigg Power of Habit book, the Atomic Habits by James Clear. Those are golden books for life.
And now that Power Habit, they're good book. That Power Habit's not an easy, quick read, but it is a good read.
Yeah.
You're right.
And I think about average kids pastor, like at 20, I was beginning to sharpen my axe. I was beginning to read magazines, read books. I remember when you were 25 Things. I wish you remember that book. What was the title of that?
Yeah, 9 Things I Wish They Would Have Taught Me in Kids.
Nine
About
Things.
children's
I
ministry.
overestimated. I thought it was 25.
Yeah, it wasn't 25, just 9. Yep.
I remember when that came out, and I devoured it. I read it twice back to back because I was like, I need a trajectory that is going to set me up to succeed. I need to. It's not about your goals. Like, I think goals have their place, but I can go, all right, my goal is that when I'm 50, I'll be able to run 10 miles. Cool. I set a goal. I didn't do anything though. I need to create a trajectory that gets me there. I need to create habits of going to the gym and what I eat. And so think about the habits and systems in your life. Find someone who maybe is further along down the road than you and ask them questions about their habits. But think about that. Don't just go through the motions, go through life. Think about your habits.
Yeah, I love that. All right, here's my number 2. And that is, don't put your work for God over your walk with God. Don't put your work for God over your walk with God. I think we're all good, whether you work in the secular or the sacred, wherever you're at Monday through Friday, it's easy to put your work before your relationship with the Lord. And, you would think, well, this isn't a problem for pastors because they work in the church and, they work with pastors and church leaders. And so obviously they're going to keep their walk with God first. But that's not always the case. And those of you pastors and ministry leaders know that this is a struggle for both ministry and marketplace leaders. And that is, don't put your work before your walk with the Lord. Keep that a priority. Now, I wish I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self this, but I'll say this, Corey, I still need to be reminded of this on a daily basis as a 48-year-old, that my walk with the Lord has to be a priority in my life. And the same is true for you, Corey, and for all of you that are watching or listening to the podcast. So pick some time. I wish I could go back and tell myself, Ryan, schedule some time every day to spend time with the Lord. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. Yeah, it can be. But you know what? If you're gonna jog for 20 minutes, and you're gonna jog a mile or 2 every day, and you're gonna take 20 minutes to do that, how about choosing, I'm gonna spend that time to pray or walk with the Lord, or to listen to some worship music, or instead of driving home from work and just turning on the radio, I'm going to spend some time with the Lord. Or, I'm going to set my alarm 15 minutes early, or whatever that looks like for you. But schedule that. Boy, you never want to, especially for those of you pastors and leaders, you've heard me say this before. I don't want you to love the ministry of the Lord more than you love the Lord of the ministry. I want you to have a vibrant walk with the Lord, and that's what the Lord wants for you. And whatever you do during the week, remember this. Jesus said, I'm the vine, you're the branches. And he went on to say, apart from me, you can do nothing, right? So yeah, I can stay busy and I can get stuff done, but boy, what happens if my walk with the Lord's what it needs to be? Think about what I could get done then, and I could be getting done what God wants me to get done, when he wants me to get it done, how he wants me to get it done. That's something I'd go tell myself. Corey?
That's true. 2. It's the difference between those who start ministry and those who fizzle out. Like,
you're right.
I think
100%.
That's why I've been in there the long haul. All right, number 3 for me.
Three,
And
you're right.
I rearranged mine
Okay.
because this one's a bigger one and it goes better. You're never finished.
Mm, so good.
20-year-old kids pastor wanted to be done with like the to-do list and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's always more. There's always more evangelism. It's not like you've gone, oh, I did it. I finished all of the evangelism that can be done.
Yeah.
There's always more recruiting. There's always more training. There's always more tweaking your message and how you're going to say it or deliver it to the kids. There's more everything.
Yeah.
And so trust God in the process. Actually, like, trust him at his word. Like he puts taking a Sabbath right there with don't murder. It's important. Are you trusting God that he can do more in 6 days with you taking a complete break versus you killing yourself trying hard for 7 days? I didn't start a true Sabbath until probably a year ago. And I hate that I haven't trusted God in my work and life and ministry with that. I've always done the try harder because you're not finished. You want to get there. And then I think along the lines of not being finished, to celebrate the milestones, celebrate the touchdowns along the way. Because I've fallen into the trap of, all right, we finished this giant Easter thing. Next, we have this summer thing, and I got to get ready for the summer camp. I got to get ready for PBS or whatever it is. And you fall into this trap of the next thing, instead of celebrating what God did.
That is so
the verse that comes to my mind is to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. All the other things are added. That I need to be trusting him. I need to be seeking him because I'm just to be faithful with what he's given me. And I need to be able to trust that even if I did a crappy job, even if my stage isn't as good as I wanted it to be, that God really is faithful. He doesn't need me to craft the perfect message, that he can use whatever I've brought to the table. And so just bring those fishes and loaves. He can do the rest. It will be fine.
Man, so good. Such a good reminder, Corey. I love that. Yeah, there's always more. There's always more. All right, my number 3 is, I wish I could go back and tell myself this, and that is to get a coach, and I'm going to be really vulnerable here for a few minutes, Corey. For the last decade, 15 years, I have told pastors and ministry leaders, you need a coach. You need a coach. Executives have coaches. Athletes have coaches. If you want to get physically fit, you're going to get a coach. If you want to lose weight, you're going to get a coach. And I would preach to pastors and ministry leaders, you need a coach. You need a coach. And God really put his hand on my heart about 6 months ago and said, Ryan, it's time for you to start practicing what you're preaching. Who's your coach? And Corey, I look back, I've never hired a coach. I've never had anybody in my life that I would say, that's my coach. Now, there are people just like all of us that I can call and I can, get advice from, or, people that will help me out. But so 6 months ago, Corey, I hired a coach. Sean Lovejoy has a coaching company called Courage to Lead, also Courageous Pastors. So he has a whole division for pastors, coaches called Courageous Pastors, and for business leaders, Courage to Lead. I got a coach. Corey, it's not cheap. I have to pay it every month out of my pocket. But you know what? It has been a significant game changer for me over the last 6 months. And I can truly say, think back, part of me with a little bit of regret thinking, boy, if I would have had a coach a decade ago, I wonder how much farther ahead I would have been, because I've got a coach now that is not only somebody that I can call and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I'm wrestling through this decision, but will keep me accountable on decisions that I need to make. And I can point to things. I'll just give you one example out of 3 or 4 really good examples, Corey, that I could give you over the past 6 months. So as we're talking about organizational health, he asked me what is our system for doing reviews? And I sat there and I said, you know what? Most of you know that Beth and I don't just run Kids Matter, but we've got a real estate company and a car wash and an insurance agency. I said, in 15, 20 years of running these organizations, I've never done a review. We've never done. Now, I will be the first one to tell you reviews are important. Yes, you need to do them. They're good. We've never done a review. He said, Ryan, it's past time you start doing reviews. And he said, here's a system. I want you to look at it and tweak it. And guess what, Corey? 6 weeks later, first week of August, and the first time in any of our company's histories, organization histories, we did reviews. And it was a great thing. Sitting across the table, we're going to start doing them every 6 months. My office manager, it's on her calendar every 6 months. It's review time. She's going to schedule them, get the docs out. And my hope is that this will become a system and it will become a habit that we just start doing reviews. I probably would not still to this day be doing reviews had I not had a coach that pushed me. Ryan, you say organizational health is important. You say culture matters. You say that you want to be kind of a leader that listens, but you don't have systems in place to do that. And here's one that you can do. Point being, you need a coach. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And you probably aren't. The difference maker can be that you've got a coach that's helping you along the way. I wish I could go back and tell myself that. Now, could I have afforded a coach when I was 20? I don't know. But I think I would have taken the whole idea of getting a coach, a lot different. And maybe for you, it's not a one-on-one coach. One-on-one coaches, I know they are more expensive. Maybe you put yourself in a group coaching environment, or you find a mentor, somebody that you can get coffee with once a month and be like, hey, maybe it's a seasoned pastor or somebody in your church you look up to. And hey, would you take a few months and just kind of coach me along in this area? Corey, I'm a big believer now more than ever that having a coach matters.
I know in my life, there's a big difference before being coached by Jim and afterward. I know I was this stressed doing this job, very big stress, little job, and was promoted multiple times. And my stress flip-flopped that I saw what I needed to see through coaching, through somebody who's further along down the road than you. So,
well, Jim says all the time, and if you're on Facebook, you see Jim say it all the time, everybody does better with a coach. I mean, if he said it once, he's said it a million times. Yep. But everybody does better with a coach. All right, Corey.
Even Olympic athletes, they have coaches, and they're the best in the world. They have coaches, plural.
You know what? You're right. You're right. And they're the best, and they still have a coach. And that's the thing I've learned, Corey, because honestly, I've thought, again, vulnerable moment, me being honest, I have thought over the last decade, 15 years, I've got this. I'm fine. I'm healthy. The organizations are growing. I don't need a coach. But you know what? Don't fall into the trap like I thought of that. So often I thought coaches are for people that need help. They're desperate. They're in decline. They don't know what to do. When actually if you're in a growth mode or part of a growing organization, that's probably when you need a coach the most, is trying to navigate growth and change. And you as a leader, if the desire of your heart is, I want more, I want to grow, I want to be a better leader, that's when you need a coach the most. All right, Corey, you're up.
So I think I struggled the most with the should I questions. And so I would want help answering the should I questions. What are the principles there? Because it's not, I'm not talking about God's moral things or God's will, but God's permissive will, where there's options there. And so I think I would tell my 20-year-old self that first and foremost, what biblical principles should be informing my decision. I need to trust the Lord with all my heart, not depend on my own understanding, guilty of that. In all my ways, acknowledge him, and he will show me which path to take. And so
Yeah.
I need to not allow cultural pressures, or what are other children's ministries doing, or fear of man, or ego. I need to not lean on my own understanding, but to trust the Lord. Second, within that vein, I'm trying to decide between a should I create a new Bible study? Should I do this baptism class? Like, good things, but could be another thing. Do I have all the facts? There's two sides to every story. Have I done my homework? Am I just trying to make a decision so that it's done? Am I trying to follow my gut? Ideas that are done in isolation. Oh, that's a quote from Watermark. Ideas in isolation sound like good ideas, something along those lines.
Yeah.
That I need to understand how it impacts the whole, how it impacts other people, gather the facts. Yeah. Am I under, number three, a pressure of time to make a premature decision? Am I worried about fear of missing out? I'm never going to get this opportunity again. I think with the coulds, that's where I've fallen probably the most, is I'm trying to move forward and make it happen, and I'm not allowing it to marinate. I'm not gathering more information. Yeah. And then fourth, I would say, in those coulds and shoulds, do I understand what motives are driving my decisions? Am I trying to honor the Lord? Or am I trying to have a good ministry? Am I trying to appear a way before my church? There's a proverb that says, people may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord examines their motives. And so I need to ask the Lord, show me the motives of my heart. Help me to make a decision here. Because those should I things, often those were the things that made me busy when I didn't need to be busy. They took my eyes off of the main thing. They distracted me when I didn't really run it through those filters. And so now pastors, hopefully hear the God's will questions, his sovereign moral code. That's not what we're talking about, but the permissible. What could be here? What could God do? Run it through a filter. Don't just take your gut and run.
Amen. So good. So good. Here's my next one, Corey. And that is, I wish I could go back and tell myself, don't take criticism or questions, negative questions, personally. Don't take criticism personally. And, I've learned this over the years, that if somebody in authority over you, if your pastor, your executive pastor, the person you report to, asks you some questions about something that happened, and it's critical, or it's negative, or whatever, don't take it as a personal attack on you, right? And I did this so often, Corey, as a young kids pastor, and I regret it, and I wish I could do it over again. And that is, when my pastor would ask me something on, why did you spend so much on this? I would immediately start building walls of defense, like it was a personal attack on me. It wasn't a personal attack on me. My pastor just wanted to know why I spent that much money on that. So here's the thing. Criticism and feedback is a tool that either can be used by the Lord to help you grow and improve, or it can be a tool that you let the enemy use to slow you down, tie your hands, and hold you back. So how do you respond to criticism? How do you respond to negative feedback? How do you respond to questions about, why did this happen this way? Why did you choose this? Just assume that, and I know this takes grace and it takes maturity, but just assume that the person that's asking you that question has your best interest in mind. They love you. They value you. They just want some clarity around that, instead of taking it as a personal attack and I need to defend myself. And, why doesn't this person trust me? And all of the nasty negative feelings and thoughts that you can get along the way. Don't take that stuff personally.
That's good, Ryan.
All right. Are we on our final round, Corey?
We are on our final
one.
Okay. Now I haven't started reading this book yet, but it's on my next to read list. So maybe Ryan, we can read it together. But there's a book called Thanks for the Feedback by Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone. That's one that I'm going to start reading on vacation. So check it out. Maybe that might be helpful for you.
It might.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Number 5. Also, I have no idea anything about the book. I haven't even cracked the cover. So if it's horrible, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if it's full of foul language and it's horrible and it's got nasty reviews, Corey hasn't read it yet. That's his disclaimer.
Send a message to the editor.
Yep.
Number 5 and is to learn from your mistakes. Now, earlier this week, you and I recorded a podcast with Brian Dollar. He talks about his book. So if you want to deep dive into this one, the Kids Matter podcasts episode most recent, it talks about that. But when I was thinking about, all right, what do I want to tell my 20-year-old self? I thought about a lot of the mistakes that I've made in ministry over the years and how oftentimes they propelled me forward and helped me learn and grow. We talked about mentors earlier. My mentor told me, don't make the same mistake twice. There's enough different ones that you can make going every time. So learn from your mistakes. I can think about a time I was trying to recruit a volunteer to host Ian, and Ian is a wonderful dude, still volunteering in kids ministry. He's huge. So anytime I needed Goliath for my Bible story time, obviously I'm pulling up Ian because he's the biggest guy that I've ever hung out with. And I asked Ian if he would be okay with hosting, like doing the announcements at the beginning of church. And he was like, Corey, I'll give it a try. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. And like, to me, I thought Ian is going to nail it. I've no issues at all here. Ian's first time though, I told him, all I want you to do, because he seemed pretty hesitant, was to come alongside of me and we'll do this thing together. No pressure. We'll do announcements. We'll popcorn it. It'll be fine. And Ian stood there, the biggest guy you can picture in the world, shaped like Goliath, holding a piece of paper, shaking in fear because public speaking just wasn't his thing. And I remember sitting there and I went, man, learned a mistake here. One, I need to ask more questions. Two, coming alongside of him, it helped this from being a train wreck. So, hey, next time I bring a new person in, doing it together instead of just throwing them to the wolves. There's so many little lessons that you learn from your mistakes if you take the time to evaluate.
So true.
So learn from those mistakes. In ministry, I'll give you a pro tip here. When you're doing an event, have a note in your phone where you are writing stuff down for next year, just your next year list. You can drop the ball and fail and have a horrible event one year. If you messed up and do the same thing again, shame on you. You didn't steward what God gave you. So learn from those mistakes. I wanted to go to a camp. I'd never been before, heard good things, but it was going to be a change in what we did in our culture and everything like that. And I needed it to be a home run. And so my first year doing it, I took 4 boys, a boy leader, 4 girls, a girl leader, and we went to this camp to make all the mistakes. We're like, we need to learn. If they have a weird schedule, we don't know what we're doing, or if there's things that are just culture that we don't know, let's figure it out so that we can bring 50 or 100 kids and it's not a fiasco. So my whole week, I'm sitting there going, all right, do this, don't do this. Next year at camp, remember, you need a spot for this, and bring shirts. And when it's this thing, it's scary for kids. Like, I don't know. So learn from those mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes, but you have to learn from them. Deep dive, go back and listen to Brian Dollar's Kids Matter podcast episode.
There you go, on that episode. Yeah, that's good. And Corey, I'm with you. I try to do the same thing after events. But here's the thing. If you don't write them down or put it on a note, next year you'll forget. So that's right. You've got to capture it while it's fresh on your brain. And then next year, go back and visit that, and you'll be so glad you did. Corey, here's my final one before we get into the last two questions. We'll land this plane. Yep. And that is, I wish I could go back and tell myself that leadership brings pain. That, yeah, if you know, Sam Chand has a great book called Leadership Pain. In the book, he says, if you aren't bleeding, you're not leading. And the more you lead, the more you're going to bleed at the end of the day. When you're working with people, it's going to get ugly. It's going to get messy. People are going to let you down. Your pastor that hired you and made you all of these promises, you know what? He's going to let you down. Your best volunteer is going to disappoint you. That family that you thought would be there till the day Jesus comes, you know, is going to get upset about something. They're going to leave the church. Your friend, you know, that you thought had your back is going to disappoint you. Leadership brings pain. So, Corey, what you've got to do is, first of all, you've got to recognize that. But second, and this is where the real challenge comes in as leaders, and that is you have to increase your threshold of pain. So, and the more you increase your threshold of pain, the more God will give you. You will, Sam Chand talks about this in this book, that you'll never grow beyond your threshold of pain. So if your pain tolerance is like this, that's about as far as you're going to go as a leader.
Yep.
However, if you understand that leadership's going to hurt, and how to process that hurt, and how to view people the way God views people, how to manage the hurt and the pain biblically. And as you increase that threshold for pain, God will give you more and more. We've all been let down in ministry. We've all had broken promises. We've all had heartaches. None of us want that. I don't wish that upon you. I don't wish it upon any of us. But the reality is that we work with fallen people, right? Sinners saved by grace. We live in a sin-cursed world. Till we get to eternity, we're gonna have to deal with hurt and pain. So pray every day, God, would you increase my threshold for pain? Help me not to take things personally. Help me to see people like you see people. Help me to deal with church hurt. You know, there is going to be church hurt. I think some of the worst hurt in the world is church hurt, that not only do that ministry people face, but even people sitting in the pew face. Remember, your commitment first and foremost was not the First Baptist Church. Your commitment first and foremost is to the Lord. Keep your eyes fixed on him. You know, so much, Corey, I think of dealing with pain and processing pain and getting through it is by keeping your eyes on the Lord. You know, when I just keep my eyes on the Lord, that can make the difference. It's just that I have a hard time with that sometimes. My eyes wander, and I get to looking at my pastor and the people and the problems and the pitfalls instead of really keeping my eyes focused on the Lord.
Brian, there's a quote by Steve Jobs that I think is phenomenal. It says, if you want to make everyone happy, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. But the thing is, my wife's a vegan. You still can't make everyone happy. Even
that's a really good point.
So, man, ministry can be hard. You're not going to make everyone happy. Keep your eyes fixed on God. That's a good word.
Amen. Corey, let's wrap up the podcast. I know you got to go. 2 questions I always like to end the podcast with. Number one, and you've been on the Ryan Frank podcast before. And by the way, isn't it interesting? We did not compare notes going into today, but really none of our points, really, they all complemented each other and they were different. So, Corey, first question, what's your favorite Bible story and what makes it your favorite Bible story?
All right. So I was on the podcast before and I don't remember what I said. So I'm answering your question-ish. I would say gained appreciation this year. Favorite as in like new favorite, because it used
season.
to not be.
Yep.
Yeah. So Queen Esther,
Mhm.
I was probably the guy before that, as I'm teaching this Bible story, I was like, so big deal, whoop-de-doo. She was Jewish. She was going to die anyway, so she spoke up. Oops. And so when people were talking about her as a hero, I was like, okay, whatever. I just didn't see it, but I gained such an appreciation and love for Esther this last time reading it. Like, there were obvious things that I missed. So like, when Esther is talking and she goes, well, like, if I appear before the king, then he might banish me or kick me out. That wasn't a probably and a maybe. She was queen because Vashti, I don't know how to say her name, was kicked out. She was banished forever. Like,
you're right.
Esther was walking in a legitimate thing here, not a hypothetical thing. And Xerxes, his anger and his, I don't know, irresponsibility, leadership, I don't know, was on display, and it wasn't good. Even when I read Esther chapter 2, it starts with, but after Xerxes' anger had subsided, like, that was a legitimate thing. And so Queen Esther, I'm going to have to go with, I have far more appreciation for, new props for, and for such a time as this verse, that one just keeps coming into my brain, that perhaps I'm leading in this capacity at our church right now for such a time as this.
So good.
Oh, Esther, I love it.
It's such a great story of so many lessons. Yeah. Faith, courage. It's one of our favorite Bible stories as well. We have in Lily's bedroom, one whole wall, these huge letters that say that. It says, perhaps God has put you here, or whatever, for such a time as this.
That's good.
All right, Corey, final question I always like to end the podcast with. What's something big that you're working on right now?
All right. So there's always the things, because like we're getting into budget season and we're working on a calendar for 2024, and those feel big. But I would say the one that is important but not urgent, one of those that I go, oh, I have to keep this first and foremost, is our staff culture, and working towards articulating it, helping my pastor to bring that forth out of us, and just doing whatever I can own within that. Sometimes that means leading up. And so the number one reason that my team members aren't meeting my expectations is because my expectations aren't clear. So the most important thing that I can do is make the most important thing the most important thing. A lot of little cliches there, but like, for real, I need to put some pedal to the metal. I need to actually put legs on it. And so what I keep doing every day before I'm leaving the office is I'm pulling up my notes app. I have one that's called turn on the flashlight. One that's called Staff Culture, and I'm reading it every single day. I'm trying to articulate it in my meetings every single day. I'm making sure it gets put into our meetings every single week, so that staff culture is something that we're actually working on. Because the calendar, the budget, there's things that are urgent and important, and it easily pushes out the important but not urgent things, such as staff culture.
Yeah, so good. Culture is so important, isn't it? You can have the best mission and best big old vision and all these ideas, but if you have a lousy culture, invest in your culture. Corey, this has been such a fun conversation. So many practical takeaways. Those of you that are watching on YouTube or listening, thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for listening every week to the Ryan Frank podcast, as I bring fascinating people like Corey Jones on with us. Corey, you're a busy man, but thank you for taking an hour out of your day to join us. Can't wait to see you soon at the Kids Matter conference.
Kids Matter conference is right around the corner. I can't
literally wait. As this drops, right around the corner. So Corey, thanks so much. Love you and appreciate you.
Catch you later.
This episode of the Ryan Frank Podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more conversations to help you stay on the leading edge. And if you like what you've heard, please rate this podcast with 5 stars. Thanks so much, and we will talk to you next time.